People talk about fear like it's a sudden thing, something that hits you in one sharp jolt. But for John Mercer, a retired Navy HOA, who had survived missions most people only read about, fear came slowly like a shadow stretching across the ground, inch by inch until it finally reached his feet. It started the moment he saw two strangers standing in his driveway. Wearing makeshift uniforms that looked official enough to fool the average person, they carried clipboards, badges that looked like law enforcement credentials, and the unmistakable air of people who believed they had power. But what froze him in place wasn't their presence. It was the sight of his 10-year-old son Jordan standing between them, confused, scared, uncertain of what was happening. John had only stepped inside for a moment to grab his wallet before taking Jordan to baseball practice. Yet in that short gap, these men, neighbors he had never spoken to, had approached his child. They claimed they were HOA security, investigating suspicious individuals, and that Jordan needed to come with them for questioning. Those words, drenched in racial profiling and arrogance, cracked through the calm suburban air like a warning shot. John read Jordan's face, first fear, confusion, and the quiet question no child should ever have to ask why. Meet that moment, John understood one thing with absolute clarity. Whatever was about to happen, these men had no idea who they were dealing with, and they were about to learn. Watch until the end. Wait a second. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments, and make sure to subscribe for more powerful and inspiring stories. Just like this one, John had chosen this quiet suburban neighborhood for one reason: peace after years of deployment nights filled with tension and mornings waking up in new war zones. You wanted something simple, a steady routine, a stable school for Jordan, and a community where a child could ride a bike without fear. Their house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac surrounded by trimmed lawns and families who waved but never talked long. It wasn't perfect, but it felt safe enough. Jordan was the center of John's world, innovative, creative, always curious. He had inherited his father's quiet focus still, not the hard edges life had carved into John. That was intentional. John wanted his son to grow up without the weight he carried, without the constant awareness of danger, the memories, the instincts that never turned off, and for a while it worked. Their days were predictable: breakfast at 7, school drop-off at 7:30. Baseball practice 3 times a week, evening walks with their dog. John didn't need excitement, he needed peace. But beneath the polished neighborhood exterior, there were cracks, small looks from particular neighbors, whispers that stopped when John walked by in meetings. He wasn't invited to subtle things he had hoped Jordan didn't notice. He brushed off the discomfort, telling himself it was just the awkwardness of being new. But that quiet tension was building, gathering weight, preparing to reveal itself. And on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday evening, it finally did. Jordan had been waiting in the driveway, glove in hand, tossing a baseball into the air. The sun was dipping behind the rooftops, casting long shadows across the yard. John stepped inside for no more than 40 seconds, but that was all it took for things to unravel. 2 men approached Jordan from the sidewalk, slow, deliberate steps, the kind meant to intimidate without looking like it. They glanced at each other before speaking, as if rehearsing a role they hadn't perfected. Jordan didn't recognize them, but their badges and stern expressions made them look official enough to make him pause. They asked questions disguised as authority. Where do you live? Who are you waiting for? Does your father live here? Jordan answered politely, just like John had taught him, unaware that these were not honest officers, not even real HOA staff, just 2 residents, drunk on the illusion of control. When John stepped back outside the scene, punched the air out of his lungs, Jordan stood frozen. The men were closing in. Their posture was wrong, too aggressive, too entitled, too familiar in the worst way. And before John could reach them, one of the men placed a hand on Jordan's shoulder. That was the moment John's instincts detonated. Every lesson he had learned in the military, every threat assessment, every warning sign, every moment of danger he had survived, locked into place. The calm suburban evenings suddenly felt like a battlefield. He approached silently, observing. The men didn't notice him until he was within 10 feet. And even then they looked surprised, almost annoyed, as if he were the intruder one. lifted his chin, trying to look authoritative, and claimed that Jordan matched the description of a suspicious youth wandering the season. Neighborhood, it made no sense. Jordan was 10, holding a baseball glove, standing outside his home. John asked one question. What gave you the right to approach my son? Their answer was a mix of arrogance and racial profiling, something about keeping the neighborhood safe from people who don't belong. Jordan's eyes flicked to his father, searching for reassurance. John placed a steady hand on his shoulder, grounding him inside. Anger pulsed through him like a storm rising. He didn't shout, he didn't threaten, but the air around him shifted, quiet, controlled, dangerous. The men didn't back down, they doubled down, and that's when John realized they weren't just profiling his son. They thought they were untouchable. They thought no one would hold them accountable. They were about to learn otherwise. The taller man stepped closer, puffing his chest as if proximity could compensate. For ignorance, he jabbed a finger toward Jordan and said he was detaining him until real authorities arrived. That word detaining hit John like a match to gasoline. These were not officers. They had no training, no authority, no right to put their hands on any child, let alone his. John stepped forward, placing himself between Jordan and the men. His posture shifted into something unmistakable: controlled precision, calm readiness, the stance of someone who had survived the worst and was prepared. For more, the men hesitated but didn't retreat. They still believed their fake badges gave them power then. One of them made a mistake he would regret for years. He reached for Jordan's arm again in one swift motion, clean, efficient, not born of rage, but of training. John stopped him. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisted it away with enough force to immobilize but not injure, and pushed him back. The second man stumbled, startled, losing the confidence he had moments earlier. Neighbors peeked from windows. Phones came out, whispers spread. The so-called HOA security suddenly looked less like protectors and more like predators caught in daylight. John didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence said everything, and for the first time the men realized they were no longer in control. The real police arrived minutes later, called not by the imposters, but by a neighbor who'd seen the entire confrontation unfold. Once statements were taken and the truth surfaced, the fake HOA cops were exposed for what they were: two residents with a history of harassing new families, especially families who didn't look like them. The officers apologized to John and assured him the situation would be handled legally. But the damage wasn't just what happened, it was what it revealed. Jordan clung to his father's side, the innocence of his routine evening forever altered. That night, as John tucked him into bed, he saw the silent question in Jordan's eyes. Why did they pick me? John wished he had an easy answer, but he refused to let fear be the end of the story. He attended the next HOA meeting, not to yell, but to dismantle the quiet culture that had allowed such behavior to grow. Policies were rewritten. Accountability was enforced. The neighborhood changed. Not overnight, but undeniably on. Jordan learned something too, that courage isn't always loud and strength doesn't always look like a raised voice. Sometimes it looks like standing firm when others expect you to break. This wasn't just one incident, it was a mirror held up to society. How many more children must face fear in their own neighborhoods before real change becomes the norm? Tell me, which country and city are you watching from? Take care.